Someone's identity was defrauded in North America every 2 minutes. Within a year from that, it was every 30 seconds. We can't even track it anymore.
The people who do these types of crimes, they're looking for the quick hit.
Someone had skimmed my account.
I knew that I'd been defrauded, and I knew that I needed money.
They shouldn't have picked me.
People have lost their entire income, retirement, savings, everything's gone.
It's pretty hard.
Prison's not fun. You don't forget the smells, you don't forget the noises, you don't forget the people. When I got out of prison in '97 and off parole, I set out to beat the system again.
Eventually, it will all catch up with you. Somebody will put it together. They'll figure out what you're doing. They'll figure out where you're at, and they'll come get you.
Mortgage fraud is not a victimless crime.
I didn't know where to turn for help.
When I got out of prison in '97 and off parole, I set out to beat the system again. Based upon the numbers that we see and what we deal with on a daily basis, we're looking at an $86 billion problem. That's with a B.
Mortgage fraud is committed for one of two reasons: to gain property or to gain profit.
It's all about money. So the more loans I could close and the more people I could get approved, the more money that I would make.
The worst part of this whole thing and the darkest moment that I had to endure, I think, was at the very beginning, when I didn't have an understanding of what had happened to me and why it happened to me. I sold my house. I found a new residence to buy and went to my bank to arrange mortgage on the new property that I was about to purchase. Much to my surprise, when I went in to see Mary at the bank, she said, "Sue, sit down. You don't own the house. You've been the victim of mortgage fraud."
I know, but it happened. I'm sorry.
A young woman, blonde, blue-eyed, very young, went into a lawyer and said she was Susan Lawrence and she was selling the home, the property that I owned, to a Thomas Wright. This lawyer asked for 2 pictures of ID. He then processed the paperwork and put it through another law firm with the so-called Thomas Wright, that I don't even know if he really exists or not, and sold the property to him. And then he got the mortgage based on all the fake ID that he presented to that mortgage company.
Identity theft can play a role in many crimes, to include mortgage fraud. Straw borrowers are often the end holders of flipped properties at inflated values, and these straw borrowers are often entities or individuals that didn't even know that they were buying property at the time because their identities were stolen and used by others.
Based upon the numbers that we see and what we deal with on a daily basis, we're looking at an $86 billion problem. That's with a B. Identity theft can be mastered within minute. I can get your mother's maiden name, I can go online, get your physical address. With that, I can do a social security search, match the 3 of them up, in turn find out on your credit report what your mortgage company is, take the loan number, head down to the Register of Deeds, get a deed of release from Office Depot, take it to the Register of Deeds, sign off on it, and I have a house free and clear. In turn, I can go refinance your house without your knowledge.
I'd been receiving statements from Maple Trust to a Thomas Wright at my address. I opened it, and sure enough, it was a statement for a mortgage on my property to the tune of almost $300,000. It was scary, I gotta tell you. I was scared to death. So I came home late one night. There's a knock at the door, I don't answer it, and it's getting louder and louder and louder. Then he started shining this huge flashlight up the hall, and then I got really scared. So I called 911, and within 5 minutes, there were like 5 police cars here, but it turned out it was a sheriff who served me with papers for eviction for non-payment of this fraudulent mortgage that they put on. The mortgage company, let's see, I don't have an awful lot of good things to say about them. I was victimized twice. I was victimized in that they stole my house, and then I was victimized again. It was up to me to prove that these guys were bad and that the fraud had been committed against me.
Industry insiders that we found to participate in mortgage frauds before include appraisers, real estate agents, mortgage brokers, closing attorneys, to name a few.
I received 5 years in Leavenworth. did 5 years and then the halfway house. Prison's not fun. I mean, and no matter where you're at, a halfway house is not fun. You don't forget the smells, you don't forget the noises, you don't forget the people. It's when everything's taken away from you and you survive or you're underneath somebody else, is control. Just like, and I use this analogy, when somebody gets a speeding ticket or for a DUI or anything, they go sit in the county jail, multiply it times 100. I mean, it's simply like that. And just the noises and just the people, it's not where you want to go. It's not where you want to be. When I got out of prison in '97 and off parole, I simply went undercover myself and been hired by 3 of the largest banks as a convicted federal felon. I teach and train and educate the industry on mortgage fraud.
The FBI currently has over 1,100 mortgage fraud pending investigations, up 38% from 1 year ago and 111% from 3 years ago.
$24 million was the actual loss. $100 million we got away with, which is $124 million. The $100 million went defunct after the fact, so the total loss would have been $124 million.
The most devastating frauds that we've investigated have included entire mortgage fraud rings where someone from every stage in the purchase of a property transaction is involved in the scheme.
We committed a mortgage fraud from the inside out. We started off making false statements on our standard 1003 form, the loan application, by coaching the consumer on what to do. In turn, if that didn't work, we would then wait till the consumer was gone and then alter and change their documents for them. In this particular case, I had found somebody who worked for the credit reporting agencies who could alter and change. She was in the data department, so she could change the credit reports. She loved to smoke dope. She couldn't afford it. So we found that weak link, and we decided, if we can supply that for you, would you take care of our credit reports? She in turn negotiated this, and we took care of her. She took care of us. I actually got called up to by the RTC, Resolution Trust Corporation. They started looking at the bad business decisions that these banks had made. And he realized that we never sent up a red flag. And in turn, that was a red flag to that auditor or that investigator. And so he took the files, all of them, and he went backwards through everything he'd ever touched and handed them to the FBI. And they, in turn, investigated.
There are a number of federal laws on the books that we can use to enforce mortgage fraud infractions. When you have conspiracies to commit a crime, your potential for doing economic harm, specifically in mortgage fraud, is greater.
In this industry, loan officers are afraid to ask questions of the consumer or other people because if they get the wrong answer, the deal's done. It's about money. If you take 2 hours of your time to do a loan, you don't close a loan, you don't get paid.
Mortgage fraud is not a victimless crime. At a minimum, mortgage fraud creates a burden on financial institutions that means a higher interest rate for everyone. But specifically, it can affect an individual a great deal. It can have a negative impact on their lives and on their livelihood.
I didn't know where to turn for help. I didn't understand mortgage fraud. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how this had occurred. I just couldn't. I often wonder what it's cost me in time and emotion. You just feel, you watch television, you see this stuff going on TV, and you just think, what have I done to deserve this?
The harm to the cause, if there was a fraudulent connection made, is calamitous.
He has hurt the charities who are trying to raise funds.
It's outrageous that money would be siphoned off for suspect purposes.
Fundraising is everything to us. We don't receive any government funding, so the only money we have to operate on is from donors themselves.
Stephen Lewis is the founder of the organization that bears his name. He's known worldwide for the work that he's done to prevent AIDS in Africa.
Overwhelming majority of contributions to the foundation come from individuals. Between 50 and 60,000 have made contributions. Almost nothing from the corporate sector, almost nothing from the foundation sector, almost nothing from the government. The harm to the cause, if there was a fraudulent connection made, is calamitous. The whole foundation has been built on the basis of integrity.
Unfortunately, the legitimate charities are all impacted by frauds that are perpetrated against charities, as well as the sham charities that are exposed, because donors are then much more skeptical. Sometimes they might even associate certain types of organizations and certain types of causes with fraud.
Camp Uchigas is a special camp for children with cancer. They rely heavily on private donations for funding and have made it a policy not to canvass door to door. So it came as a big surprise to camp president Rob Dryden when he learned that someone was claiming to represent their camp in door-to-door solicitation.
One of our donors called us and let us know that someone had come to them and asked for money on our behalf. And when we asked what it was about, it was no relation to any event that was happening, so we explained to them that they weren't operating on our behalf, and then we called the police.
It becomes a vehicle then, since people are so generous, for those scoundrels who would wish to bilk the process.
In January 2006, he came to the door, which is not that unusual for our neighborhood, and said he'd been here last year. Did I remember him?
Perhaps you could help us with $50 or $100. It'd be really great.
All right, can we hold on just one moment? I know my husband had given previously, and so I donated another $20. He then gave us his charitable tax receipt with the charity listed on the bottom and the registration number, which is supposed to confirm that, in fact, he is a charity. I did ask for a brochure from the charity.
Can you give me some sort of brochure or flyer?
And he told me he had just run out. We checked on the website with the name of the alleged charity and the charity number on the bottom of the receipt. It indicated that, in fact, it was not a charity, which meant that he was a fraud and that we would not be getting our tax credit.
The effect is that the legitimate charities are then subject to much greater regulation and oversight by government agencies and regulators, making their administrative efforts much more difficult.
It's outrageous that money would be siphoned off for suspect purposes.
We do a lot of great work, and we work very hard at making sure people know who we are and what we stand for. And integrity in this business is primary. And when someone goes and uses your name and takes money from someone, that donor doesn't receive a tax receipt, doesn't receive a thank you letter, it undermines everything that we've been trying to do.
Well, thank you very much.
It is a white-collar crime in the sense that he hasn't physically hurt people in the community. However, he has hurt the charities who are trying to raise funds legitimately, and he's also hurt the individuals from whom he's taken money.
I would suggest, if you don't know them, don't give them cash. You could choose to write a check to them, or better yet, you could get their name and go onto the organization's website. The majority of organizations have websites that you can donate on, and make a donation on behalf of that person.
My wife and I are careful. We demand to see the identification, and we authenticate it. You just have to be on guard all the time.
Fundraising is everything to us. We don't receive any government funding, so the only money we have to operate on is from donors themselves.
Since being defrauded, we no longer donate to people who come to the door.
The damage to the foundation would be heartbreaking. The damage to the cause would be catastrophic.
They got you both coming and going. They did the art auction in which they actually auctioned off the fake artwork, but they did so by rigging that auction process in and of itself.
We believe that there are over 10,000 victims in this fraud scheme.
She had my images in her control, and I never suspected that anyone would take my images and pilfer them, but that's what she did.
Part of the reason the fraud scheme was so successful is that it was on live television. It aired on TV on Friday and Saturday nights. It aired all over the United States in all different cities across the country, and also aired on live streaming internet, so actually it went worldwide.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fine Art Treasures Live Art Gallery.
When people watch a show and are buying products, in this particular case, art, from a live TV show, the fact that it's on TV gives it some sense of legitimacy. So I think people felt it was a safe purchase, because if it was fake, they wouldn't be on the air.
Close and personal, folks. It is stunning. I've got $100. Thank you. Let's get a clock on it.
Initially, I saw the complaints and I kind of put them in a file, kind of made a note of it. The amounts of money that were being lost during these complaints didn't really rise to the level of an investigation that I would start. Over time, I started receiving more and more complaints, which set off a kind of a red flag with me because people normally don't call the FBI when there's a crime. This is what the prints that were being sold on the television show look like when they're taken out of the fancy frame. As you look at it, it's just basically, it's almost like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with a photomechanical image of a actual Picasso image. This is a piece actually that the FBI purchased during the investigation, and we paid approximately $5,000 for this piece of art.
They had got you both coming and going. They did the art auction in which they actually auctioned off the fake artwork, but they did so by rigging that auction process in and of itself.
We have $225. We have $240. Clock, please. $250.
They would have fake calls and fake bids that they would use to run up the price of their fake art that they would sell. And the second part of that was, completely selling, moreover than not, false and fraudulent artwork to their customers. And so when I say coming and going, they actually made you pay more for the fake art by running up the price through those fake bids.
Get the detail in this.
It's just great. And you know what's fabulous about these pieces is because he was a war correspondent, during this time, he saw these actual events firsthand. This is firsthand.
They told their victims that the art that they were purchasing was worth anywhere up to $80,000, $90,000. They would tell them, this is for your grandchildren's college. And often when they were using their propped fake art, they would say, this isn't a deal, this is a steal. And in fact, it was, as it turned out.
I think people want to believe that they're getting good deals. They want to believe that, that maybe they can, maybe they have the opportunity to buy this great piece of art way, way under value. And I think the TV show and the people who were running it really took advantage of people and people's sense of wanting to believe in something that was too good to be true.
One of the things that they did was they made it extremely difficult for people to challenge the purchases. They did get a fair number of complaints, in fact, a lot of them. And when they actually got the artwork sent to them, it wasn't that hard to tell for some people that this was not what it purported to be. And what the company did, what these two people did essentially, was aggressively fight anybody who complained. Most of their purchases were via credit card, and people would want to cancel those transactions. And the company was able to use the evidence of the certificates of authenticity and the fact that they, in fact, delivered the goods to successfully fight off the overwhelming majority of those complaints for a period of time. Charlene Mitchell had no idea for a period of time that her art, her work, was being sold at auction at Fine Art Treasures Gallery.
I first discovered I was defrauded when a man approached me to buy my artwork because he said he had bought some from a source I had never heard of and wished to purchase more.
The main thing, I think, is in this kind of day and age and in this global economy, the fraud schemes that have been thought up by criminals around the world have become more and more sophisticated.
The quality of much of her work was very poor. She used the cheapest ink she could to print these giclées, and after a while the print might look okay when you first get it, but after a while the colors change and it's hideous.
Yeah, one of the things that they did was have fake certificates of authenticity that they had either purchased through another supplier or simply printed up themselves.
Hurts the value, it hurts your reputation, doesn't do you any good.
You can barely get a piece framed for $360, let alone triple matted and a Marc Chagall piece.
Everyone thinks they can get away with it at some point. And what ends up getting you in the end, what ends up getting these crooks in the end, is their greed. The greed takes over. The amount of money they're making is so great that they can't stop.